Hello. Now you might see the incredibly ugly camo in the background. That's because I just unlocked the gearing on my NA account, on my Potato God account. This is actually my first game in the gearing. And as I started playing this, I remembered that I haven't actually covered the gearing in a while. So I figured maybe it was time. This is my first game on the NA account, but so I'm missing some captain points. I think I have a 16 point captain, so as you can see my torpedo reload is 115 seconds. I would preferably have the torpedo reload perk, which you need a 17 point captain for, because you of course always get last stand first. But regardless, I figured this will be more of a first commentary, so to say, in a while. I'm against the usual T10 stuff. There's a carrier involved as well. A Shimakaze, Fletcher, pretty much the usual stuff that you'll be facing. And I figured this is a ship that I always used to like. There was a time, of course, when the ship was exceptionally frustrating, when the turret destruction mechanic was still a thing, and pretty much no one played gearing back then because you kept losing turrets all the time, so it was extremely annoying to play. Regardless, the gearing itself, it's of course, these days, it's the ultimate knife fighter. It's the #1 DPS king when it comes to getting close, in terms of destroyers, that is. You want to be pushing into caps, you want to be contesting caps, you want to be fighting off other DDs. Your hope is to find any other DD. You can pretty much wreck any other DD if you get close to them. That includes even the Khabarovsk, of course. That means you have to get close to him. And ideally, you don't even want to shoot at Khabarovsk or IGN DDs in general. You just want to spot them and have your team shoot them to shit. Because, of course, they have the advantage in gun arcs. You have the advantage in significantly better stealth and torpedoes. My 16 km torps are already up. If you noticed where I launched them, by the way, I tried to line them up so that I can hit multiple targets, both this Yamato in the front and the Yamato further back, because these torps of course have insanely long range, 16.5 km range. Unlike the Fletcher, you trade off quite a few things to get those. They do less damage than Fletcher torps, and they take significantly longer to reload than Fletcher torps. But in return you get this range, which is of questionable use. Personally, I don't rate it very high, but when you have it, at least try to make the most out of it, and in this case I of course tried to line it up with multiple targets. And since I knew I was about to hit some targets or hit a few hits on the Yamato, I already started preemptively smoking, and I'm gliding forth right in front of this guy with HE loaded. The idea is, of course, since I have gotten a flooding on him, the idea is now to start a fire. But since I have recommended, in the past I recommended using the Demolition Expert on the gearing, but I have moved away from that spec, I hit 3 torps on the Yamato in the back as well. See, that's the advantage of the long range torps when you actually use them to their advantage like that. Anyway, the lack of Demolition Expert is quite clearly showing here though. I'm hoping using AP here would actually give me more raw damage than using HE does. Yes, AP works just great against, even gearing AP works just great against battleships, but I'm of course hoping to get that fire, since they have used their repair, so fire would be permanent. The same reason I'm switching to this target in the back. He also ate some torps, and I'm of course hoping to get a fire on him. But the lack of Demolition Expert does certainly show. Unlike the Khabarovsk, which would have probably easily started a couple of fires already, the gearing has significantly lower chance of fire. Significantly lower. And it shows. These are a lot of hits and not a single fire. I've been shooting nothing but HE. This is what, a good closing in on 100 hits, and I don't have a single fire. That happens. My torps are up already, so I throw them down there where both the battleships and a lot of other action was going on, because, well, why not? I kinda like to use these torps on cooldown because they have such insane range that you're quite likely to hit a lot of targets. And in the worst case, they kind of serve as a herding tool. They force the enemy to turn away, they force them to maneuver, to avoid, and so forth. So even though they have a very long cooldown, the additional range does give you some significant utility. I prefer the Fletcher torps personally because I like to get close in and really utilize them, but you can't get it all. I kind of would like to sneak. There's a wait, at Lexington in their spawn. I'd kind of like to sneak up on him, but I think he's AFK. This Atago is a bit of an issue, and now I see a Neptune on the minimap as well. Oh crap. A Neptune, of course, does a huge amount of damage to DDs, especially to the fat plump gearing, which, well, he's basically designed to eat AP volleys. It's significantly thicker than the Fletcher, which means that AP volleys really punish it heavily. That's 4k gone. Pretty much the advantage you gain from using Survivability Expert gone in the first chunk. I don't want to be fighting off that Neptune at all, but I wouldn't mind ambushing him now that he's lost vision of me. If he continues pushing past this island here, I wouldn't mind torping him. You notice that other Yamato, he's basically been fleeing in a panic all the way to the spawn. I think those torps I launched were spotted and he had to turn away from them. And he's been pushed completely out of position, which is of course one of the advantages of those torps. Even though they don't net you visible damage, the impact they have on the battlefield is still significant. Or it's possible it's just a Yamato who likes running away to their backline. I mean, either one is possible these days. I go for the Atago, because it looks like the Neptune has no interest. Once again, I try to go for both though. If the Neptune decides to push out, he might eat those torps. If he doesn't, then the Atago in the background will eat the torps. So try to line up these torps in ways that you can go for multiple targets, because they do have a long cooldown. So trying to make the most out of them every time they are up is pretty important. This is of course the optimal angle to launch torps at cruisers, battleships and such. Straight from the side, least chance of avoiding, least chance of dodging them. And as I stagger them on top of each other, he's probably gonna eat so many that he can't dodge them. 4 hits, instant kill on the Atago. Of course, these US DD torps are better stealth, better concealed than Japanese ones, which means they have less time to react to them. They don't deal as much damage, they're not as fast, but that lack of reaction time compensates very, very heavily for this. Now, I'd really love to ambush this Neptune. I've been sailing around here with AP loaded. That Tartaga was more of a side kill than a primary target. I haven't, you see, this is one of the things why I really want to return to the gearing. I don't really know how US AP will perform against Royal Navy armor. I think that if I get close enough, I'd say maybe 4 km away from the Neptune, I can probably citadel him, in which case I will shred him in seconds. Time to smoke up. But this is 5 km away. How does the AP perform? Wow, really? Yeah, he's bouncing my AP. His armor actually bounces this AP. Now, the superstructure does give me pens. The superstructure does give me pens and some decent damage, but the broadside bounces it. You see that? 26 shattered shells. I literally have to aim higher to get plunging shells, because it straight up shatters. Well, this is a pretty important lesson though, because this was something I didn't know myself, but in this case using HE would have been much stronger. Using HE would have dealt a huge amount of damage, because of course the lightly armored Neptune takes a lot of HE damage, so with HE I would probably have dealt twice or even 3 times as much damage as I did there. But apparently if you are even at 5 km away, Neptune broadside can already shatter these shells. So that was something I actually personally didn't even know, and that was a pretty important lesson to know. The next time when I decide to go brawling with a Minotaur or a Neptune, I'll know just how close I will have to get to actually have what I consider a good chance of success. Of course, if I'm going to fight the Royal Navy cruiser, I'll be charging right into them, because the closer I get, the bigger my advantage. And of course, I want to stay angled to reduce their damage as much as possible, because giving broadside to any Royal Navy cruiser in a DD is a really fast way to die. Now, stealth fire, just like the Fletcher, you can do it. This Fletcher can stealth fire from 9.6 km. Gearing can stealth fire from 9.7, not that big of a difference. Of course, the Fletcher does have better range than you have, and that's of course one of the reasons why at one point I ran the module, which increased gearing range, but I haven't really bothered with it as of late. Mostly because there are so many different ways you can get spotted these days, all the radars and such, that I don't consider it worth it. So I have just completely switched to the torpedo reload, because reducing the cooldown on the torpedoes is one of the ways I'm looking to increase the damage that I'm dealing in the gearing. Anyway, A is secure, or all the enemies are killed, so I instantly move to B to capture it. You often see a lot of USDDs, or well, any DDs in general, they tend to avoid the objectives, and they start sailing around into enemy spawns, they start hunting hills, they start doing a lot of really silly stuff. But when you play USDD, your priority should always be the objectives. I mean, you should be playing around the objectives. That doesn't mean you have to, you cap one, you have to straight up charge for the second objective right away. No, you can play around the objective just as I did there earlier, just secure it and help your team and cause damage and so forth. But when you start completely veering off the map and you start sailing into the, look at our Arataga down south. When you start doing stuff like that in a DD, then you lose so much capture point value, you lose so much spotting value. Like, I can help my team by spotting the enemy DD, I help them by capturing, I have my smoke utility and all of this, and you lose all of that value when you go down there into the enemy base. For example, this Fletcher who was trying to stealth fire, because of me being here, he's now spotted, which forces him to veer off and start avoiding. And another lesson here: when you see an enemy DD do this, don't open fire at this long range. Why would I open fire yet? I wait until I'm almost spotted. You saw that I'm spotted at 5.9. I open up fire at 6.2 km, right before he could spot me. That way I retain the surprise, the advantage, but he's already so close that he's within my effective range, where my DPM just straight up melts him in seconds. And that's how you should engage other DDs in the gearing, or in USDDs in general. The closer you are, the stronger your guns are. Of course, you don't want to get into torpedo range, which super close range where you can't avoid it. But in cases like this, just wait until the optimal moment before you open fire. There's no reason to open up at 7 km and give them plenty of time to start avoiding, smoking, dodging and so forth. You want to maximize your efficiency. I popped defensive AA, hoping to quickly snipe down these planes. One of the reasons why I like defensive AA is, of course, getting rid of these spotter planes. I get rid of one of them. I hope that was the only one. Now I'm unspotted and I'm going behind the Fletcher smoke. I should honestly probably use AP here. Yeah, he's probably gonna hit my torps. At least now I get to show off what I meant earlier about the AP being very strong against battleships when they give broadside. It probably gives you more raw damage than HE does, or not probably, it does give you more raw damage. Sadly, this Yamato spotter plane was still up, which allowed him to see me and launch a pretty nasty volley on me. But it's not a big deal, my torp is gonna finish him. I didn't want to use my own smoke yet, because I'm saving the smoke for this Yamato on the right. Now, you saw earlier when I shot HE on the Yamato what kind of damage I dealt. Hopefully I will be able to demonstrate here what kind of damage you can deal with AP, even on the so-called strongest, or well, the most armored T-10 battleship, the tankiest one, which is of course the Yamato. His guns are pointed away, so that means I'm not afraid to glide out a bit here. And switching to AP. When they give this much broadside, you notice I'm aiming at the very top of the hull. Not the waterline where the armor is thickest, but the top of the hull, right the limit between where the superstructure starts and the broadside ends. And you can see I'm doing like 2k AP volleys constantly, and the damage adds up and adds up and adds up, and it's very, very strong, and it's very frustrating, of course, for him when he's eating 2 to 3k AP damage pretty much every few seconds. And that it doesn't look like much, but it adds up being a lot of AP damage that you can pump out into enemy battleships. Well, game ends. Not really that much damage, but it's a pretty good performance still, 177k. I sadly didn't get my Kraken because the game ended before that. Pretty good base XP, 14-minute game, 100k from torps, rest from guns. Usually I get more from guns, but that kind of switches and changes. And there's the Neptune damage. Very pitiful. And of course the reason why I run this camo, 29k Captain XP, which is, I'm obviously leveling this Captain. Anyway, let's move on to the build, since this is a bit of a preliminary commentary on the gearing. Right, since I haven't covered the ship in a while, I'll go over the build. Not much to talk about in terms of modules. Consumable wise, I recommend Premium Smoke, Premium Repair, as always. Upgrade wise, main armaments mod 1, aiming systems mod 1, AA guns mod 2. I don't really rate it because, well, that's only if you really queue up with CVs. Torpedo tubes, in the past I've ran some variations. I've ran reload, I've ran range, but right now I kind of prefer the torpedo reload to make more use out of these long range torps because of all the different ways people have to counter your smokes. Propulsion mod 1 and 2 to prevent engine breakage, and because your rudder shift is already so good that being able to accelerate is more important. Stealth as the last upgrade. Captain perks wise, basic firing training is the first one. Last stand, superintendent, survivability expert for that additional tankiness, concealment expert for the stealth, and of course once I have 17 points I'll spec out the basics of survivability and get the torpedo reload that I spoke of, because I really want that 10% shaved off this torpedo reload. Since it's so nasty at 115 right now, I want to drop it down significantly, which is exactly what that perk will do. The last point will go into basics of survivability. Anyway, this was my first gearing commentary in quite a while. I will be featuring this ship some more. I haven't, as you can see, I only have 12k XP on this ship. I haven't played it much at all yet, but I will be covering this ship some more on my channel since I know I have had plenty of requests to go over it. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later.